Welcome to Analyzing the Annotated Bibliography. This screencast was made for week 5 of the Writing 106 course as you get started on your second project, which is the Annotated Bibliography. What I would like to do today is look at the 4 parts to an annotated bibliography. For each source that you include in the annotated bibliography, you will have 4 main components. The first is your citation, so the reference information. The second is a summary of the source, along with significance of the source and the conversation that the source is a part of. In this screencast, we're going to look at these in a little bit more detail and use these components and try to find them within an example of an annotated bibliography. First, a citation with full bibliographic information. Again, this is a pretty typical standard reference where you provide the name of the author, the title of the document, or if it's a web page, a book or a chapter, an article, so the title of the text, the title of the larger container. So for instance, if it's a chapter of a book, then you provide both the title of the chapter but also the title of the book. Your publication date, location or publisher information. I'm not going to go into much detail right now about all of these different pieces of a bibliographic reference. This will be covered in the screencast, The Puzzle of Writing a Citation. So check that out and check out the sources on that for information. But for now, let's take a look and just kind of confirm what that looks like in an actual annotated bibliography. Here we can see that the reference is what starts the annotated. We provide the source information, the full reference, and it looks like what you might expect. This is using APA format to format this reference. From the citation, after that comes the annotation. Annotation has 3 main parts. One of those very important parts is the summary, and this is where you frame the general idea and the findings of the source, and you're summarizing the main relevant ideas or information. Keep in mind as you're writing the summary that you are interested in this source because it is relevant for your particular research project. And so as you summarize, keep that in mind, that you're not just trying to give a big picture of the source, but you're also trying to give a sense of why the information is relevant. So again, you're trying to go, what is this source? Give a sense of what it is, maybe who wrote it if you think that is important. But you're really interested in the ideas that the source is bringing to your project. Another component of the annotation is the significance of the source for your project. You're trying to explain what the source is offering that helps you understand the topic or that helps your research project in some way. For instance, is it presenting new information or is it presenting a different perspective on your topic? Does it offer evidence for answering your research question? So you're really articulating here, you're really explaining why this source is helpful and how you are using this source for your research project. The third component of an annotation is trying to indicate the conversation of which the source is a part. So you're describing the issues or the ideas that the source is responding to, because the source is not isolated by itself. It's taking part in a larger conversation and discussion around your topic. It might even be responding to an event or responding to another source, another article, or other ideas. So you're trying to show that you understand this larger conversation. You try to show what position it is taking within this conversation. Is it supporting an idea, or is it kind of trying to disprove another idea? Or is it so the connections, the similarities, the differences, you're trying to pay attention to this in a larger sense. And your chapter in the Bedford Researcher on reading sources will help you kind of learn how to pay attention to these things as you read. So again, your conversation, what is this source adding to the conversation? Where does it fit within this conversation. Let's take a look at what that looks like within an annotation. You'll see here that the annotation for this first source is about 2 paragraphs long. So it's a little bit lengthy. And let's look at it kind of line by line almost. So first of all, we start off with understanding what the Conference on College Composition Communication is. And that's here with who the author is. And so we're trying to understand what this is and what it matters for this research project. And here we discuss the actual source itself. So it's the title of this particular document is called The Student's Right to Their Own Language. And here we go, we describe it as a resolution that the CCC passed in 1974. And here's what was happening. So you can see that right now we have a summary going on where we're getting a sense of what the source is, but we're also starting to understand the historical significance of this document. The CCC wanted to validate. Here we have a sentence that helps us understand what the document might be doing, the purpose of the document. Again, this SRTOL was a statement, okay, that argues this, that the presence of languages, etc., etc. The SRTOL also affirms. So notice that the language is not just says or state, but allows you to see the arguments and the discussions that are being made here. Okay, then it says much of the piece talks about what dialects are and why seeing this. So again, we're summarizing, but we're also trying to understand the position that this piece is taking. In this first paragraph, you can see that it's overall a summary, but it's also got the elements of significance and conversation within it. And that's important to remember. You're not likely to write summary, then significance, then conversation as separate paragraphs. They kind of work all together. In this paragraph, we do kind of shift a little bit to understanding that this document is significant. Okay, it's served as a foundational piece of the discussions. So we understand its significance, we see its role in the conversation. All right, and notice that here the author is defining an important term. The language difference is an important term that's being used in a particular way, and so they wanted to make sure that the reader is understanding how this term is being used and what it means. And here we go. I'm reading this piece because it is so important to these discussions and because I want to be familiar with the history. So again, we have a sense of the significance of something and why we're reading it and what we're trying to get out of it. It also helps me realize that it's been going on for decades. Again, conversation, significance for the author. So here you see, again, you have an citation, you have the annotation, and they all work together to provide a full sense of information. We're going to look at the next one example. Again, here is the reference information. We can see that there's several authors. It was 2011, and we see that here's the title and that it was written as a journal article. This citation, this annotation starts off with going, this is another really important scholarly piece for this topic. Okay, so right off the bat, understanding the significance of it and its role within a conversation. Horner et al. Are advocating for a translingual approach. What we're seeing here is the use of the author's names, and very common in academic scholarly writing. People don't necessarily want to use all of the author's names, okay, and so they use this abbreviation of a Latin phrase. Et al. It means et alia, it means and others. So it's just saying, you know, like Horner and the others are advocating for a translingual approach. So that's a pretty common way of writing some authors' names. But importantly is that we tend to use the author's names. We don't always say this article or this piece. We're more sometimes interested in the fact that these are people writing them and they have interesting viewpoints and stuff. Now, science writing probably doesn't do this because they're not as interested in the authors and their take on a subject. But in the humanities, and potentially in social sciences or education, you're interested in what people are saying. There's more of this conversation and debating of ideas, while in science, you're more interested in the research findings, and it's kind of separated from the researchers in a little bit. So, although this idea of translingual is not new to them, this piece is really the cornerstone for the approach. Again, we're getting a sense of the significance of this particular article for the conversation. Notice that translingualism, as they describe it, so this is kind of a summary and definition of the term. It allows us to understand what the article is about, but also being able to understand that it's being framed in a particular way. I chose this piece because it plays a big role in this discussion, and this topic is a really big thing. Okay, and notice here in this sentence, the author is referring here to this other topic, this other article. Okay, so you can do this as well. If the two sources kind of touch on similar things or might present different perspectives on the same thing, you can put them in conversation with each other within the annotated bibliography. Okay, and it might be that you have sources that don't really have anything in common with each other and don't need to be put in relationship, but if you can, do that. Let's recap, understanding that the four components, the citation with the summary, with the significance, and with the conversation, those four elements work together to provide a sense of what the source is and how it fits into a larger picture of your research and the topic. And you need to be able to show that you know this. Some key attributes to draw your attention to. Again, go back to the example and look for these elements. One is that you can use I. I'm using this piece because, or this piece is important because. You can also use the phrase the research project. Okay, this piece is important to this research project because. Important terms, important acronyms or abbreviations you should define. Next, you can refer to authors, all right, not just the title of the piece, except in certain cases, but you can refer to authors by their names. And finally, academic writing doesn't have to be hard to understand. You can keep it simple, you can keep it straightforward. Defining your terms is an important part of that, but don't need to use fancy language. Finally, why do we assign an annotated bibliography? Well, because when you are doing the work of writing the annotations and the citations, it helps you connect with your sources more thoughtfully. You're thinking about what they're doing and not just kind of going, okay, mining it for information, but what is the information doing for you? And that develops your sense too of a bigger picture and conversation. This is an important thing to learn as a researcher and scholar, to understand that you are framing things in a larger way and that you're not just using your research to find an answer, that there's a bigger picture going on. So I hope you found this screencast helpful. Certainly if you have questions, let me know, and check out some of the other resources available on Sakai.